Good evening, everyone. My name is Logan Grab. I am so excited to be here this evening. I know we've been working together for the past several weeks as I have put together this presentation for everyone. I am currently a graduate student with William Woods University, and the course that this project is for is EDU 710 Aspects of Leadership. The primary purpose of this project is to analyze the district leadership within the Neosho School District. Now, as all of you know, I am not an educator in this district, and I am a teacher and coach for the McDonald County School District. Now, with that being said, the reason that I branched out to look at other school districts is because A, yes, it was required by this project, but B, it really did help expand my knowledge base on how other districts structure their leadership and how those leaders within those districts do things. Are there a lot of similarities that I see between our district and the Neosho School District? Absolutely. Are there some differences? Sure. And I think that by taking what every single district that I have looked at does great is only going to make me a better leader in the future. So, with that being said, I appreciate everyone taking the time to talk to me, do interviews with me, whether that were in person, through a Zoom meeting, through a survey, through an email, whatever it may have been. I know that this has been a relatively trying time, to say the least, and I think that everyone, especially the Neosho School District, has done an absolutely fantastic job of meeting people in the middle, making sure they have what they need during the pandemic, whether that be staff, students, community members, and really making this a group effort, and the leaders of the district made that a priority. So we are going to look at first the organizational flowchart for the Neosho School District. Now, obviously, we have the Neosho School Board at the top of this flowchart. Each of you are aware of who is on the school board, but with having had a recent election, we maybe have some people here in the audience that are not sure who everyone is, so we're going to go ahead and introduce everyone and just make sure everybody's on the same page before we start looking at some of the other pieces. So the current school board president is Mrs. Kim Wood. The school board vice president is Mr. Jonathan Russell. The school board secretary is Mr. Dan Haskins, and the school board members at large are Mr. Stuart Puckett, Mr. David Steele, Mrs. Melissa Wright, and Mr. Stephen Weist. I want to thank each of you for the service that you have committed to with the Neosho School District. Some of you have been on the board for many years, and some of you, this is your first time being on the board, and I think everyone knows how much of a commitment that is, and everybody at Neosho is definitely in good hands with each of you leading the charge for the district. The superintendent, as you well know, is Dr. Jim Cummins. This is going to be his third year as a superintendent in the Neosho School District. He has 21 years of education experience, so he has, been around for a while. He's been able to work in a lot of different settings with a lot of different groups of people, different school districts, and he even has a background in finance with being a former certified public accountant. And as a superintendent, I think that that's something that comes in very useful. Obviously, you want to be fiscally responsible, and he is able to keep Neosho in a very good standing in that way. He also has his doctorate in education, and his executive administrative assistant is Miss Tanya Patterson. Just to give a little bit of background information with my relationship with Dr. Cummins, I actually attended Missouri Southern State University and graduated with his oldest daughter, and so I was able to meet her and meet their family really before I ever even knew Dr. Cummins in a professional setting. He was one of my instructors while I completed my specialist in education, and I was also able to get to know him then. But I just have to say that from the moment that I met him, you could tell that he was genuine, that he was someone who truly cares about people and walks life as a servant leader in all areas. So I am really excited to talk to you guys about the impact and role that he has served and continues to serve for the Neosho School District. Now, if we look at his section primarily of the flow chart, it is the majority of it. And we will kind of delve into the assistant superintendents later, but we kind of want to look at everything that falls under Dr. Cummins. So as we saw before, we have the Neosho School Board, and then we have Superintendent Dr. Cummins, and once again, his assistant, administrative executive, Tanya Patterson. Now, he has two assistant superintendents, that fall under him on this flow chart. So the first one is Richie Fretwell, and he is the assistant superintendent of operations and HR, and he also has an administrative assistant, and her name is Tara Twitchell. Now, we are going to take a look at Mr. Fretwell and his responsibilities that fall under him in a little bit, but his role is very expansive, and he plays a very important role in making sure that things in the district are running smoothly. Then on the other far end of the spectrum over here on the right-hand side, you have an assistant superintendent of instruction, curriculum and instruction, and that is Mr. Nathan Manley. He also has an assistant, and her name is Crystal High School. Now, we are going to talk about him later too. The three people that are primarily discussed in this presentation are your superintendents. Dr. Cummins, the head superintendent, and then the two assistants, Mr. Fretwell and Mr. Manley. So we'll revisit that a little bit later. Now, the other areas in which Dr. Cummins is responsible for that fall under him are the CFO, Colin Carey, and payroll and insurance, which you've got Missy Myers that takes care of that, and then accounts payable, Kalina Commons. The public relations communicator they have for the district is Megan Spangler. Now, I did not actually do an interview with Megan Spangler, and I think it's something that I might actually want to do in the future because public relations is something that really does interest me a lot, and I think that it's very important for any organization, and especially school districts, especially with social media being so accessible and a primary way of communicating so much of the time. We saw that during the pandemic, as well, since we were not able to have that face-to-face contact. But back to talking about Megan, she did an absolutely fantastic job. She worked very closely with Mr. Cummins while he was working through how they were going to handle this as a district, obviously with the assistance of Mr. Manley and Mr. Fretwell. And she does a really good job of just staying really professional when putting out messages for the district and keeping that consistent and responding to people whenever they have questions. Now, moving on to technology, Scott Harris is the head of that area. And then we've got a couple of people who are network administrators for the school district, and that is CJ Wickstrom and Amon Hennedy. And then there are also Chromebook rooms. Neosho School District has a lot of Chromebooks, as you know. They are a one-to-one school district. And so we've got Rodney Griffin, Randall Griffin, Brady Daughtry, Kurt Cook, and Nathan Cox who work in that area. And then the last category on this section is nurses. And that is Jennifer Cobb, who is at the helm of that for the Neosho School District. Obviously, this has become an incredibly important role. It's always been an important role, but the education that the nurses have been able to provide our school districts with during times of illness in general, and especially during the pandemic, has truly been priceless. They are some of our frontline workers. I know that, there are nurses that work inside of our school, and sometimes those individuals are still working in hospitals. It may just be a rotation that they work that's on the weekend or in some other setting, just to kind of keep themselves fresh too, and to know that they're out there serving our communities in that way is something that I think that Neosho should take a lot of pride in. So moving on into a little bit more about Dr. Cummins specifically, whenever I spoke with several of his followers, whether that be people that are at the alternative school, principals, within the various schools of the district. And then obviously, Mr. Fretwell and Mr. Manley are considered followers of his too. The consensus was pretty clear that he is a servant leader, and there are certain characteristics that servant leaders have that are pretty consistent with anyone that might be called a servant leader. So the first one, and there are actually 10, I'll kind of run through this so you guys get an idea of what the expectation of a servant leader would be. And the first one is listening. That was something that was consistently stated whenever I was talking to people. They said that first and foremost, Dr. Cummins is a good listener. He takes the time to listen to people. And whenever you are leading such a large organization, you do have to take the time. And sometimes it may seem like, life is busy, but the fact that he takes the time to do that really, really goes a long way with people and says a lot about who he is. He has shown many times that he is empathetic toward people's situation and promotes healing and awareness whenever people might be struggling with things. He also has an awareness of what's going on, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but he sees something and he also has foresight. I can look to the future and kind of see where this might be happening. Persuasion is something that is a strength of his too, and he's able to conceptualize things, able to put a plan together and put it into motion. We kind of go back to foresight. He is able to see, based on whatever circumstances might be happening at the time, he's able to see and sometimes predict what is going to happen and then what is the best action for him and the rest of the school district to take. Stewardship, just a very honest, ethical, good steward in general. In fact, that was stated by the assistant superintendents. So I think that there is a huge amount of respect there between all three of them. Dr. Cummins really, really is committed to the growth of people. Over the past couple of years, he's entering his third year as superintendent for Neosho. You have seen such tremendous growth, really good, high quality staff that are hopefully going to be retained because at the end of it, he's building community. He's building community within the schools. He's building community within the city of Neosho, and it's pretty incredible to see the amount of pride that everyone is taking in the school district right now. Mr. Richie Fretwell, he is the Assistant Superintendent of Operations and Human Resources. He is entering his third year as Assistant Superintendent. And this is just impressive to me because I have worked with a lot of veteran teachers, and he has 27 years of education experience, and you just can't put a price on that. Having that much knowledge and background experience is incredible and brings so much value to Neosho. He's able to bring so many different perspectives and strengths. Mr. Fretwell worked alongside Dr. Cummins before he returned to Neosho because, as some of you know, he was with the Neosho School District before. They actually worked together at Seneca for a bit, and then both came back to Neosho. And as we mentioned earlier, Tara Twitchell is Mr. Fretwell's assistant. So I do not know Mr. Fretwell incredibly well outside of the interviews that we've had recently, but I can tell you that he's a really fun guy to be around. His energy and enthusiasm, gets me inspired and ready to go. And I'm usually used to seeing him at basketball games because he reps a lot of basketball games around here too. So hopefully we can get back to that this winter as well. So let's kind of go in and talk about what Mr. Fretwell is actually in charge of whenever it comes to the Neosho School District. So the principals that directly report to him are Trent Barrett, and he is the high school principal. Then you have Ryan Sheffield, and he's at the alternative school. And then you have Jennifer Cryer, who is at the junior high. Now, maintenance, Building and grounds, building services, this is a huge, vast area of responsibility. There are several different schools, obviously, 11, and the campuses on all of those have to be maintained regularly. So the building and grounds manager is Joel Easton, and the building services manager is David Allen, and they both report to Mr. Fretwell. The recent bond issue that passed obviously is going to have them and a lot of other people very busy for the upcoming months and years, but it is truly exciting to see the amount of growth that Neosho is going to experience because of that, and updating those facilities is just going to elevate that pride and give Neosho a fresh look and have facilities that they just haven't had access to before. There is a print shop in the district, and we have Tammy Fugate and Tammy White. Then the director of safety is Mr. Ryan West. And Cheryl Johnson is who takes care of the food services. We've seen her come in and present a few times. Transportation is a huge, huge responsibility. Much like McDonald County, Neosho has students that live throughout a very vast area. Buses travel many, many miles every single day. And the transportation director is Michelle Embry. She and Mr. Fret will work very closely to make sure that transportation goes as smoothly as possible. Miss Tammy Hayes, she is the manager for human resources. If you go to apply for a job at Neosho School District, that is who your contact is going to be. Such a nice, personable person, and that is so important whenever you have somebody that is a frontline worker like that, whenever they're that first point of contact, to be somebody that's a friendly face, that is inviting and makes people feel good about doing any type of work, whether it's to have some other type of meeting or to go in for an interview or file an application. You want people to walk away feeling good about whatever it is that they did whenever they walked into that office or called them or emailed them, and Tammy makes sure that that happens every single time. Now, moving on to athletics, that is the last piece that Mr. Fretwell is directly in charge of, and as you all know, athletics is a huge piece too. You have Brandy Arthur, who is the head athletic director and in charge of all of the high school athletics, and then John Moore at the junior high level. With being a coach and oftentimes helping out our athletic director with some of the responsibilities that we have here at our school in junior highs, I completely understand the type of work that these individuals are doing and the amount of time they're putting in. They are coordinating so many different schedules and events that the time that they put in is very, very important. And I know that Mr. Fretwell appreciates that. So I know that it seems like, holy cow, how could somebody possibly do all of these things? And I will tell you that Mr. Fretwell does them incredibly well. He is very results driven and is consistently getting results. So moving on, let's look at his leadership style a little bit. There are a few different ways I felt like I could have gone with this, but once I really started taking a look at it, I came to the realization that Mr. Fretwell, it doesn't matter what situation he's in, he figures out a way to make it happen. And I know that that is the exact type of leader that you guys were looking for, so I'm so glad that he is here in this school district. Now, with the situational approach, there is a history of usefulness in the marketplace in general, so this isn't something, specific to education. Really, none of these leadership styles that I'm talking about are specific to education. They could apply to several different types of organizations. The situational approach is frequently used for training within organizations, so whenever school districts sometimes might be doing training, they want to train people in a way that they can look at a situation and say, okay, how could I approach this in order to work through this problem, or whatever it may be. And there's a practicality that comes to it, so there's an ease of understanding with it. It's not an overly complicated type of approach, and it's intuitively sensible, and it's really easily applied to a variety of settings, which makes it pretty universal, and having prescriptive value as well. Now, the Flexibility, which I kind of alluded to that a little bit, does make this quite desirable. And as a leader, you do have to have that ability to be flexible and not just see things in black and white and be able to work with that gray area. Mr. Fretwell does that really, really well. And one of the things in talking to the principals at the different buildings, he reminds leaders within those areas that, they are capable of doing what they set out to do and accomplishing their goals. And you do have to approach people differently depending maybe on their personality, and he definitely takes that into consideration. So some of the things that he probably considers based on his performance is he looks at the goal at hand, what is trying to be accomplished by the person, and then he seeks out opportunities to help the followers learn new skills. So if there's a skill gap preventing someone from accomplishing something, he's going to try to coach that person up and get them to where they feel comfortable with it and can gain a more perfected version of that skill. And then obviously, like I said before, just helping followers become more confident in their work. And when a leader lets a follower know, hey, I believe in you, there's a reason that I put you in this position and you can do this, that's just a really good feeling. All right. So now we are going to take a look at Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and that is Mr. Nathan Manley. This is going to be his second year as an Assistant Superintendent, and he has a total of 15 years of education experience. He was a former elementary teacher, and as we stated earlier, Administrative Assistant is Crystal High School. Now, whenever I look at Mr. Manley, Mr. Fretwell, and then Dr. Cummins, I see a lot of diversity within the experience they have with education, the things they've done, maybe prior to going into education, and the types of things they did. You have high school administrators, high school coaches, elementary teachers, and I think that you do need to have a good mix of that. So the combination of these three is a pretty dynamic duo. Now, if we look at who Mr. Manley has underneath of him in our flow chart, we once again see his administrative assistant, but we're going to go to the left-hand side first and talk about the principals that report to him. So we have Kathy McCombs at Benton, Satatha Burr at Carver, Christina Colley at Central, Jody Martin at Field Early Child. Then we have Samantha Hamilton at Goodman, Lee Woodward at South, and then Charity Williams at the middle school. Now, Bright Futures is a program that the Neosho School District does participate in. I have had some experience with this program as my school district used to have it, and it's something that greatly benefits students, and Dee Dee Dowell is the manager for Bright Futures. The Educational Technology Department is overseen by Mandy Liebeck. And then the MOSIS coordinator is Jan York, and then Power School, which is where students can see their grades and submit work, is under the supervision of Brian Cook. Now, over on the right-hand side, we do have Special Services. Kim Culp heads that up. And then Federal Programs is directed by Connie Bryant. We do have counselors in every single one of the schools, and the director of counseling is Tracy Clemens, and our EL interpreter is Sandra Cordova. So as you can see, Mr. Manley's responsibilities are vastly different from Mr. Fretwell's, but there is a lot of responsibility with each one of them, and they're both really in kind of their niche area. They both thrive in the areas that they have been assigned to. Now, whenever we're looking at the leadership style for Mr. Manley, he's hands down a transformational leader, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I think that this is one of the things that most leaders strive to be. Someone who is charismatic and has influence is very important. I don't know that you would find anybody much happier to to go to school every day than Mr. Manley. He loves what he does, and his administrators realize that, and the teachers that work with him realize that. Everyone had glowing remarks whenever I spoke with them about how he works with people. There are people that said, because of Mr. Manley, I believe in myself. How incredible is that? And the fact that the Neosho School District has somebody that can make people have that feeling who maybe didn't at one time is just tremendous. So that inspirational motivation, you've got that going on. He's constantly trying to help our teachers and administrators grow in a variety of areas. So providing that intellectual stimulation is very important. And then individualized consideration, what does the individual need? So he does a really good job of modeling the way. He models what he would like to see done. And I think that we see that with all three of the district level leaders, but Mr. Manley really does embody that. Encouraging the heart, he cares about people. He's empathetic towards people, and he really does want people to have that shared vision. And at the district level, especially, being able to kind of have that trickle down for that to be latched onto by everybody in the district is very important for the district to be successful overall. And then enabling others to act. Whenever people feel confident in their abilities, kind of like I was talking with Mr. Fretwell earlier, Mr. Manley does a really good job of this. He empowers people to do their very best and to make decisions and think outside of the box. So that has been really exciting to experience in the way of his leadership. So once again, I want to thank everyone for having me here this evening. I know that many of these things you have probably already witnessed and recognized in the leaders you have in the district, but to really be able to see it all together is something special. And I think that Neosho has a very bright future ahead of them. Being able to do this study has benefited me greatly, and I learned a lot from it. So thank you for your time. I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.